My name is Mackenzie Grayson.
And I'm Lucy Murdoch.
And today we'll be talking about the ethical aspects of cloning. We will first talk about what cloning is, go into the pros and cons, and then finally talk about how we feel about the topic. So first, what is cloning? When people think of it, they think that it is just simply a human or animal replication, but what they don't realize is how complex it actually is. It's all about DNA molecules, distinct steps, and it takes a lot of time. Vanecki and Wolfram states that each newly produced individual is a clone of the original. So in other words, it is genetically identical, and it can arise from asexual or vegetative reproduction. Asexual reproduction is when an offspring is produced from a single organism, which most bacteria and fungi use this type of reproduction. And vegetative reproduction is just a form of asexual reproduction, and most plants use this. So here's a graph of what people think about cloning, and as you can see, most people feel neutral about the topic. So there are three ways how cloning works, and the first way is somatic cell nuclear fusion, also known as SCNT. During SCNT, the nucleus is removed from a healthy egg, and it becomes a host for a nucleus from another cell. According to the Committee on Science, Engineering, and Public Policy, the chromosomes are removed from the egg to make it enucleated. And then the cell can finally stimulate, divide, and then become a blastocyst, which is a structure that is created in early development of mammals. As for the Roslin technique, it is very similar to the somatic cell nuclear fusion because it is a variation of it that researchers created at the Roslin Institute. So the somatic cell divides just as the SCNT cell would. However, it is deprived of nutrients. So when it's deprived of nutrients, the cell goes into a dormant stage. Then it is placed next to an enucleated egg, and they fuse together to become an embryo. Then the embryo can go into the surrogate, and this is actually how Dolly the sheep was created, and she lived for 6 years. Lastly, the Honolulu technique is another variation of SCNT. However, the somatic cell is injected into the enucleated egg, and instead of being fused together, the cell is bathed in a chemical solution and cultured, and then it can be placed in the surrogate, and then it will grow. So there are many pros of cloning. The first one is for personal uses. So for example, you could clone a deceased pet. So the cloned pet would have the same genes. However, according to Genetic Science Learning Center, the genes would be the same. However, the environment would affect how that personality of the cloned animal comes about. So Cece the cloned cat was a clone of Rainbow the cat and was produced 5 years after Dolly the sheep. She had the same genetic makeup, but different color markings due to the X chromosome with the orange gene being inactivated. Another pro of cloning is for medical uses. Mice have been used for cloning animal models of disease, and scientists cause mutations in their genes to find out more about diseases related to humans. So scientists want to hopefully further their research with this and find out more about medications and treatments. Also, it can allow to build stem cells, and this will maintain and repair the body, and hopefully in the future we will be able to produce whole organs. And this is a pro because so many people are on a waiting list each year for an organ, and if people are fortunate enough to receive an organ, they usually are put on anti-rejection drugs and are in some kind of discomfort for the rest of their lives. So if we can produce organs and clone them, we will have more survivors from needing organs, And since the organ will be an exact match, there will be no reason for anti-rejection drugs, and it'll save the people discomfort. As for agricultural uses, if we can clone plants, there will never be a shortage of crops and livestock will never go hungry. So this will allow for livestock to become more healthy, and scientists will be able to take healthier cells from them to assure that their offspring have dominant cells. For helping endangered and extinct species, it's a pro because scientists have been cloning the woolly mammoth and the wild mountain goat that have been extinct for a while now. And according to the Committee on Science, Engineering, and Public Policy, it is less complex to clone endangered species because their cells are more healthy and living, whereas for an extinct species, their cells are more impaired. And they have actually been trying to clone the endangered cattle, the gar and the banteng. And lastly, cloning can help with infertility problems, so couples can live the dream of any other parent of having children of their own. It's unfortunate when couples cannot have children of their own, so it'll just add to the list. And yes, adoption is an option, but it is in your own genes. So overall, in the long run, cloning will produce a more secure and stable society.
Okay, so since Mackenzie talked about the pros, I'm going to talk more about the cons of cloning. So the first con of cloning we have up here is increased malpractice. And for those of you who don't know, malpractice is just the illegal, improper, negligent care of professional activity. And that could be healthcare professionals, lawyers, anything that is of professional standing. And increased malpractice can happen because they're deliberately producing these individuals so they can kind of make like undesired traits and kind of turn them into what they want for kind of like their own selfish needs. So that could be a big issue with if cloning comes to be in the next like few years or however long it could take for it to happen with humans. And a prime example of this is, I don't know if you guys have ever read the book or seen the movie My Sister's Keeper, but that book kind of has the same idea as cloning in it. Basically, this couple has a daughter and she has cancer and she's very ill, so they decide to have another daughter, and that daughter kind of acts as like the older sister who's very sick, like organ donor. So she was basically born just for the purpose to donate her organs to her older sister. So that kind of puts a stent on your quality of life, because the younger sister knew that that's how she was born. So that could be a possibility if cloning does become a thing. Kids could be born just for that reason, and that kind of has a negative aspect on their life, just knowing that that's why they were born. And the next one is a lack of diversity. If cloning does become a thing in the future, that could make us genetically all, like further on in the future, kind of all the same, and that could limit our adaptation if we're just taking genes from the same people and trying to, with adaptation, it just would stunt that growth. And identical twins are a natural source of cloning. Identical twins, how they work is when the mother is pregnant, the embryo actually splits, so the genes are identical. So they do occur naturally in nature, and this is an example of identical twins. So with cloning, they are the exact genetic copy of each other. So it could lead to everyone eventually kind of looking the same and just a lack of diversity. And obviously we all have our own unique traits and our own freedom and individuality, so that could kind of just take that away from us. The next one is it could interfere with nature. There's a big religious aspect when it comes to cloning because a lot of people believe it is unnatural and it's not like babies are supposed to come from God and it's supposed to be a natural thing. So if we're kind of just inflicting pregnancies on women, it's kind of an unnatural way of babies being born, and they could be thought to not have a soul because they're not naturally conceived. So that's another big thing. And people could also abuse this if it does become legal. If unauthorized personnel get access to how cloning actually works, it could be abused, and people could be cloned for unlawful things or like criminal acts and something like that. So that could go a lot along with the negative aspect of cloning. And just some more cons of cloning, it could result in faster aging process because how it works is although we're making new cells, we're also taking cells from a donor. And say we have a donor that's 30 years old and we take those cells, they can have an imprinted timeline on those cells even though they are being taken, and our cells do recycle a lot, but there is a theory that it can lead to premature aging or death because if you do take somebody who's 30 years old and you take cells from them, there's that theory that those cells are 30 years old and they can lead to, even though you're making an embryo out of it, they could have a premature death and premature aging because of that, because their cells are not naturally born and not from day one. They're kind of taken from somebody else who has already gone through the aging process. And a lot of the times cloning ends up in a defect or death. I know Mackenzie talked about Dolly a little bit earlier, and Dolly the sheep was 1 out of 277 trials, and she was the only one that really survived to 6 years old, and all the other ones pretty much died before they were born or shortly after. So there is that big aspect of harming the surrogate mother if cloning did become a thing, and it could do more harm than it could good, and you don't really know until you get more research on that. The next one is the division among people, clones versus non-clones. People do think that if cloning does become a thing in real life in the future, that clones could be seen as like less human than non-clones, and that could just be a big break in society. And if you think about it, if you put into perspective how Mackenzie said, if parents decide to clone a deceased child, they could always have to live up to those expectations of that deceased child, and that could put a lot of psychological pressure on that child to try to live up to the high expectations of somebody they may have never even met, and that could just put a lot of stress on that child knowing that they were born kind of to fill that gap for their parents. Another thing is creating like a superhuman. Like I said earlier, these people are made from, these people are basically made in a lab. So physicians or unauthorized personnel can kind of like make those traits how they want to for their own selfish needs and sort of change them to make sort of like a superhuman. And the last aspect is the security and legal. So you kind of have to consider what laws would be made, and if you want to think about it, like whenever we're going around, we're shedding our skin cells, even if you're just in public, like typing on a computer, or if you're just anywhere in the bathroom, washing your hands, like we're shedding skin cells all the time. So there could, hypothetically, anyone can take your skin cells and clone them, and that's kind of scary to think about, knowing that that could happen. So there would definitely need to be a lot of laws put into place regarding punishment for unlawful cloning, defending the rights to your own DNA in your own body. And there's also a lack of consent, especially if you do clone a deceased child. They really have no way to give their consent to saying that that's okay or that's allowed, especially with animals too, because animal cloning is really the only thing that has been successful thus far. So you really can't get that consent from animals, obviously. Okay, so we decided to relate this topic to utilitarianism, and according to our very own Dr. Gravely, utilitarianism is making life better by increasing the amount of good things that happen and minimizing the amount of bad things. And going further into that, rule utilitarianism is applying those concepts into rules, and it's an action that is right conforms to a general rule. And we've said that typically rule utilitarianism would think this was wrong because they would think that you would want to more so focus on achieving a treatment for current people, and the goal would be to not create humans but to figure out what's wrong with them and try to cure the current diseases that we have. And especially because cloning is so unpredictable, even with animals there's been a lot of deaths with cloning, and since it is so unpredictable, that could inflict harm on the surrogate if we do end up doing this with humans. And our thoughts on cloning is we're for it. We think that it could eventually be like a good thing, but we definitely think that there need to be like laws that are put into place for it, given that there's so many legal aspects that could invade our privacy and all of that. But we think that a lot of the times the benefits outweigh the weaknesses, so I think that we were both for it.
Any questions?
Okay, so you think that cloning is all right as long as we've got laws to regulate some of these negatives that you talked about?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. I think I'm probably kind of on the same page as you are with that. I had some questions about some of the negative arguments. I wonder, let me just ask you in general, I wonder always when we're talking about cloning, if the arguments that that are brought against cloning are unique to cloning. In other words, aren't these already arguments that could apply to regular old reproduction? So say, for example, in my sister's keeper, I'm trying to remember the details of that. That wasn't actually a cloning case, was it?
No, but through my research, I found that it's a lot of times they like compare it to that because it's sort of the same idea.
Yeah.
Is like people could use cloning to make a baby. I mean, they obviously they naturally made the second daughter to be the organ donor, but a lot of people could clone that, so they would have the exact DNA and the exact organs of the baby that is sick.
So I would, I don't know, you tell me what you think about this. So it almost seems to me like then that's an argument in favor of cloning, because what's going on is you're saying people already do this naturally and they end up with siblings and we hope they can donate the organs. It would be more efficient if we could do it with cloning, because then we would know that the organs would match. I mean, they're doing the sort of using the kid as a means already, so why not do it in a way that is going to work better? You know what I mean?
Under the cons more so because like the psychological aspect of the child that was born for that sole reason, just like knowing that they were born to be an organ donor, that kind of like lessens their quality of life, not knowing that they had like a purpose for being born, not just for the parents' like own enjoyment to have another child, but for basically to be the organ donor for their older sister. So I put that in the cons more as like a psychological aspect, how they would have to live their life knowing that, and that kind of would like lesser their quality of life and probably self-esteem aspect too.
All right, so the cloning actually kind of puts more emphasis on the fact that they were made for, and so there would be a psychological kind of effect for that. All right. Any other questions?
Do you know how much this would cost?
It didn't really say like how much it would cost, but it definitely, like when I was researching, it said you would have to be fortunate enough to be wealthy to be able to clone. So I'm guessing it's a lot.
I'm going to ask one more question. On one of the slides, again, sorry for you, sorry, Kenzie. You had something about deliberately producing undesired traits. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
Malpractice.
Can you help me understand that? Why would somebody do that?
Just because they have like the power to. Through what I researched, it talked a lot about like physicians, because they would have the power to that they could, and it said that it would increase a lot of malpractice just because that if cloning became a natural thing, they could produce humans for like unlawful things, like what I said when they would abuse cloning, they could create clones for like criminal acts, and it just said that it would increase a lot of malpractice rates.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you.